If you haven't seen Rings of Power yet, you haven't seen what I've seen. You see that thing that I just did there? That's called intention. If you're an actor, you want to kind of portray the thing behind what it is that you're saying. For instance, if you said the line, "You haven't seen what I've seen," you want to kind of portray what it is that you've actually seen. But there's a problem with that. If you have a big epic, and this is a big epic, there are going to be some scenes where you actually don't know what it is that you've seen. So it takes a director of some sort to tell you what it is that you've seen. That's the biggest problem with Rings of Power, as far as I can tell. At some point in time, there should have been a director involved, I don't know, or maybe showrunners, or maybe someone that could have told the actors what it is that they're talking about. Because for the first episode, it's just people saying ponderous things. There was a time when the world hadn't had a sunrise. But even then, there was light. That's an actual line from this piece of crap. Someone wrote that. Someone wrote that ponderous line and thought, that should work somewhere in the script. That's the problem with Rings of Power. There are all these great ponderous lines that would ordinarily be like sprinkled maybe once in every episode as some piece of wisdom, but because they constantly get drawn up, it's like Obi-Wan just went nuts in your script, and he's always walking in trying to say something important, but it doesn't land because if everyone is saying something that's important and no one reacts to it, it's no longer important. Hint, if it's actually important, have someone react. Just watch this exchange, the whole "you haven't seen" thing.
You have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen.
What has she seen? Do you get any hint of what she's seen? Do you think it's amazing? Do you think it's sad? I'm going to give you just like 3 random ways of doing this. You haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't seen what I've seen. Look, the point is, they wasted a bunch of opportunities with that line. It's a bunch of ways to deliver the same line, and they didn't use any of them. This video is for showrunners, for writers, for actors, for actresses, for producers, or anyone in Hollywood who has money to burn. You have an opportunity to make more films. I would love it to death if the next project that you put together isn't just about, let's see how much money we can throw up against the screen and see if some kind of a plot sticks. I looked up the 2 showrunners for Rings of Power. I would love to know how they got hired, because there's nothing in their past that would indicate these aren't 2 guys that I'm just going to send like almost $1 billion to and see what they create. These guys either have great friends in high places, or they are the best bullshit artists that I've ever run into, and I would love to hear the pitch meeting that created this. But this is an epic, and because it's an epic, there's these Michael Bay images sweeping across the plains, always a camera just running up to the actor and getting in their face, or coming back from the actor in these just gigantic vistas. It's gorgeous. There's choruses of music always in the background for no fucking reason. There's just people singing, and there's orchestras playing in every scene, and it gets tiring. And there's a bunch of things that I want to say about Rings of Power, but the biggest problem is you get bored really quick. Don't get me wrong, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you can tell that they spent a ton of money on the costumes. They cast gorgeous people in most of the parts, and they tried making everything look beautiful. And there's something about that where it's just too perfect in a lot of ways. If you've ever worked as a stylist, if you've ever been a photographer doing some kind of setup where you don't want everything to look perfect, you know what that's about. There are some times where perfection is actually your enemy, and that's a lot of Rings of Power. Which brings us to Galadriel. Now, I don't know the actress personally, and God help me if I ever get cast in something that's like $750 million. I'm probably not going to speak up and say, hey, what am I supposed to be doing here? I imagine there's part of an actor or actress who gets cast in something that big, especially as the main character, that they don't want to make waves and they don't want to ask too many questions, and they're just kind of trying to power on. But there's a lot going on in this movie, and I get the feeling that they didn't let her know most of what was supposed to happen. There's a character in the beginning that literally just asks her a bunch of questions. And you kind of get the feeling that the character was just put there so that she can give a bunch of exposition so that everyone can get caught up. But there's a thing called show me, don't tell me. And for some reason, the showrunners never heard of this idea before. It would have been really helpful so that we don't have to just watch a bunch of people ask questions and then the other person answer questions. And then in the meantime, what should be eventful things like her finding a secret passageway, and instead of reacting to the fact that she found a secret passageway, she's like, all right, guys, come here. Instead of anyone following her going, holy hell, you found a secret passageway. How'd you do that? It's just skipped over. There are all these opportunities for people to react to things that happen, and they never react. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but acting is reacting. So if no one reacts to what's going on, especially if there's big things like a hidden passageway, or, oh man, this piece of stone is cold for no particular reason except for this one spot where apparently the bad guy touched and that's just boiling hot, shouldn't every person in that room just freak the F out about that? And don't get me wrong, they react, but it's kind of like a subdued reaction, like, I guess the bad guy was here. Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot? Because a stone only sees downwards. That's another set of lines from this piece of crap. Someone wrote that. They wrote that in the same episode that they wrote the whole light thing. Oh my God. So what's the plot of the first episode? Well, Galadriel, her brother was killed by Sauron, and she's going off to find him. And that's pretty much it. No, I'm not kidding. That's pretty much it. There's other kind of stuff that goes on in the background that kind of like gives you a little bit of a backstory of all the different people. But instead of like kind of launching off into a bunch of different things, which could have like gotten me interested in seeing more, it just kind of like leaves that hanging. There is a fight with the snow troll, and that kind of could have been cool. It starts killing off members of the party, and then Galadriel goes in, and after it kills off a bunch of members of her party, she goes and single-handedly kills the entire thing. But she does the coup de grace, the last blow, while not even looking at the thing. She kind of like does one of those and kind of leaves you wondering, has she ever fought creatures before that lived? Because that's a really bad thing to do as a warrior, to kind of like kill the thing with your back turned and then not turn around right away just to make sure you killed the thing off. Unless she's a fan of all those Halloween films where everyone thinks that they killed someone, but they didn't. And so the entire purpose is to let the thing live so that you can like go to the thing coming back up and killing you while you have your back turned. Otherwise, when you do the coup de grace thing, go ahead and kill it. And like, look, make sure it's dead. It's just a thought, Galadriel. So in response to this heroic act, where she goes ahead and kills a snow troll and does it seemingly easy while the rest of the party was just getting their ass kicked, her entire party just decides to resign. And they decide they want to go back instead of following her. Now, this is just me. If I'm with a bunch of guys who are just elves in general that can't kick the ass of a snow troll, and then there's the one person that goes ahead and kicks ass by itself, I'm going to stick with the person that just kicked the ass of the snow troll, because I feel like that's kind of like the better, safer move, rather than like, we're all resigning, we're all going to go off on our own. You just saw most of us get our butts kicked by a snow troll, but we're going to go and see what else can happen. No, I'm going to go with the person who just kicked the snow troll's ass. Because if nothing else, I can just like stand behind her and trust that I'm probably going to be safe. So already there's a giant plot hole. I'll call it a plot hole. Normally it would be a plot cave, but I'll call it a plot hole right now. That just seems stupid. By the way, all that happened in the first 20 minutes. And then we get an introduction of the Harfoots. Wait a minute, I will say this. There is a character in the Harfoots that I like, and it's named Nori or something like that. And it's funny because you're like 20 minutes into the show, and suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's a character that I see. That's someone who's kind of relatable and kind of reacts to things and has reactions to things instead of being so cold and detached from the world that they don't care about anything. And she's a likable character. In fact, they focus on her for a little while, and you're like, oh, okay, this can go somewhere. But then we're back to Galadriel, who can't be affected by anything. When we meet the Harfoots, that's an opportunity for something really cool to happen. Turns out Harfoots are really, really good at camouflage. So after two random guys pass, all of a sudden the Harfoots all come out of their hiding places, which is a cool idea. But you know what's even cooler? Having an entire army trudge through there. Just having an army going through there, and then having the Harfoots like pop up out of their hiding places like, hey, that army didn't even notice that we were here. Here's another problem that I have. I feel like Lord of the Rings for the first episode was devoid of characters. And when I say devoid of characters, I mean there's no one that's memorable. If you ever write something, just throw this idea in the back of your head. I'm giving you this one for free. If you ever write anything, in the first episode, have a character that everyone is going to remember. Even if it's just a tertiary character, even if your main character is someone that has to be stoic or has to be elfish or has to be so, I don't know what the word is, uptight, that you can't have them have any kind of memorable features of any kind because they look like all the other elves, because they all look very pretty and then they're also the same, that nothing stands out about them. Even if you have that problem, put a different character in that we remember and that we relate to, so we get invested. Just a thought. Here's another line. You don't know what's down there. That's why I must go. No kidding. That was an actual exchange that happened. I am so baffled by the way that the script is written in this particular movie and that anyone greenlit it. Can you imagine that? Not since Cats has a more questionable decision been made in movie making, but they made it. Now, all of this aside, the second episode is kind of watchable. Stuff happens. There's character development in one or two of the characters that are not Galadriel. But it really leaves you wondering, why didn't they just take all that stuff that happened in the second episode and just kind of shove it into the first episode so that you would care about any of the characters instead of waiting an extra episode? It's bloated, it's poorly written, it's gorgeous as shit. The music sweeps in at the wrong times. It feels like Michael Bay directed most of the sweeping action shots, and it feels like Tommy Wiseau might have had a hand in this because there are plot points that are bought up and then not returned to for a great amount of time. If there's one thing I want to take away from Rings of Power, it's that apparently if you're two guys that have barely any resume, you can still get a job in Hollywood and produce a $750 million hot mess, and Hollywood's gonna stand behind you and push it like crazy.